to order for the Economic Development Authority of Beecham County. First,
I'm going to
to
roll call.
determine the quorum.
Okay, Ms. Dearden.
Present.
Mr. Sloan is absent at the moment. Mr. Pittock.
Here.
Mr. Smith.
Here.
And Ms. Weissong is absent.
Yes. Hi, Mr. Lumpkins.
So, do we have a
We do
quorum?
not have a
We do not
quorum.
have a quorum.
We do not have a quorum.
Still may come.
Right.
Okay, so next, we have an opportunity for citizen comments. Do we have any comments?
Hello, I'm John Lumpkins. No comment.
No comment? Okay, as there are no comments then, we'll go ahead and close that section. Moving on to scheduled matters. We have a presentation from Tara McGee with our county attorney regarding FOIA and FOIA acts. So take it away. Sure.
I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you all about the Freedom of Information Act, FOIA, as we say, of course, and the Conflicts of Interest Act, FOIA, so that I can just make sure that you have in the forefront of your minds issues or thoughts or facts that should catch your attention because one of those two acts may be implicated. I don't intend to be able to give you such an in-depth discussion of either of those that you'll become an expert or you'll know the answer to a question when it arises. My goal, because those are complex, lengthy, and convoluted, is just that you understand that there would be an issue and that you know, wait a minute, we gotta be careful. We have to stop it. I think whatever that might be, or particularly for conflicts, we need to talk to somebody about whether this is a problem. And that really is, I think, a good basis of familiarity for you to get with FOIA, because again, they're very FOIA in particular is very fact-driven and fact-sensitive. And FOIA, adopted back in the 70s, was actually known as the Sunshine Law, and the purpose of it was so that there's transparency in government, and so that governmental decisions and decision-making is open and available to the public. And so, adopted here, for instance, your meetings are all open to the public, and through doors that are unlocked and so forth, so they're recorded. They're recorded, minutes are taken. These are all applications of the Freedom of Information Act. There are two major aspects of the Freedom of Information Act to be concerned. It deals both with meetings and with records. And you should be aware that a meeting starts with the fact that we have 3 or more of you present in that. And I'm going to direct this without even. We're going to continue to use 3, even though tonight you have a quorum requirement of 4.
So as of July 1, it's 3.
Yes, as of the change. In any event,
You mean the quorum will be 3?
the quorum will be 3.
Right.
FOIA still uses 3.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm not going to make a distinction for tonight because it's a difference now. So most of what you need to know about your FOIA meetings is taken care of by Lisa. She puts up notices 3 days before your meetings. You all adopt regular meeting schedule so that she's able to put up notices of those. She takes the minutes, she prepares the minutes, you all adopt them. Most of that she takes care of. So what are the things that you would need to be concerned about in FOIA? What are the issues you would need to be concerned about? And that is that you would be concerned that you don't inadvertently have a public meeting of the EDA and talk about EDA business in a format other than a regularly scheduled or regular meeting or special meeting.
Does that meeting, does it email constitute a meeting when you have more than a thread with everybody in?
Well, what we're always concerned about when we talk about it being a meeting are the number of people, the purpose of it, and the discussion of public business of this kind. An email or text messages could, under the FOIA Council, could constitute constitute a meeting if they are, again, about public business, if they are for the purpose of that discussion of public business, and if the communication is so instantaneous as to constitute what appears to be a meeting. Now, there's FOIA council opinion that's on topic. It relates to instant messaging, okay? So technologically, they're not even up to text messages yet. And we all understand that emails could be sent and sit in someone's box for a week, a month, or a minute. And so the key part about communication in any form, because it certainly does not have to be in person, is that you want to avoid that instantaneousness that would come close to someone saying it's a meeting. So do not, on purpose, text each other about a decision or about a matter before this board, hoping to discuss it. Now, you can text each other about, are you going to the meeting tonight? You can send out a text that says, the weather looks bad tomorrow, should we not hold the meeting? But the business, when you're literally going to conduct the business of this meeting, and I, it's not my impression that that's the type of things you guys use text messages or for. Lisa, for instance, sends things out by email to your Coochie County addresses about, about your agendas and so forth. But you would have to have an instantaneous element for to be considered a meeting. And then again, it has to be about the business, the transactional business, not just the meeting agenda. So the other things is that you then are allowed to come together for reasons that are EDA, but not the transaction of business. So you're welcome to have 3 of you come to the board meeting. You're welcome to attend the Christmas tree lighting. You're welcome to, as members of the ETA, go to, the swearing in of a judge. And because you're not there to transact the business of the ETA, that's not. So you see how the elements all have to be present. The purpose of it has to be for the transaction of business. You have to actually be using it to transact business. You have to have the 3 of you. So most, other than what I want you to take away from that, a caution about the 3 of you at the end of a meeting, standing around saying, hey, next week is the bond, next month we're going to talk about the bonds for so-and-so. Yeah, have you heard that they don't have, that's where you start to go away. You were not supposed to be talking about what's coming to the board next month. Though, Lisa, if you'd like to step out of the room, I can talk to you about it. You a board member, in other words. But
Two's fine.
two's fine. Reason. Yeah. And again, it has to be about the transaction, the so cautiously you understand that, when you're not at a meeting, 3 of you not be standing around talking about what might be coming up before you. Certainly not what they might be saying.
What's our latitude for executive session? What do we get to look out? Is there?
Sure, you're allowed to go into what FOIA calls a closed meeting, and there are a number of identifying reasons for it. Personnel matters, though I don't think you have any personnel, so you're probably not going to. More importantly, probably is something about an economic development opportunity. And so the acquisition of real property for a public purpose, or the disposition of real property, if discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect your bargaining discussion about a perspective.
That's the operative concern, is that it affects.
If it would adversely affect your negotiating position. Yeah, so if it was actually already public, that you were, if there was already an announcement,
Right.
you can't go to a closed session about it. Discussion concerning a prospective business or industry, or the expansion of an existing business or industry. Again, assuming there's not a previous announcement of that step that's going to be taken. So if Matthew was coming in here to tell you that we were about to land Amazon's new headquarters, by the way, and that had not been announced.
Cat's out of the bag.
Is it appropriate to have an executive session at every meeting? If there are things percolating out there?
There is not a limitation on the number of,
That's my question.
yeah, on the number of ones that you can have if you have a legally supportable reason.
Some EDAs have them every month.
I always wonder if they really have a legally supportable reason every month, but maybe they do. You can go into consider, so a couple of other reasons, consultation with legal counsel is one. most of these I don't think that you would necessarily need. You might have one for proprietary records or trade secrets. But in terms of a closed meeting, what I would expect is that Lisa or Matthew would be aware that you had a topic coming up. Lisa would be preparing a closed meeting notice for you in motion, and she would prepare that motion, identifying the specific category it has to be, and then there's a process that you have to go through. You go into closed session, identifying the topic that you're going to be talking about and its protection, and then when you speak only about that topic in a closed session, and when you come out, you certify by individual vote that no other communications occurred other than as was advertised. And so again, you should be aware that that can happen and that there are rules, and then Lisa and Matthew help to make it happen the right way. Motion would get drafted.
For the boards that I'm on, you do not have to record the closed session minutes, the discussion, only that a vote was taken or was taken. Is that essentially the guidance that this council would give us as well?
You would never take a vote in closed session.
Okay.
I'm not familiar with a requirement that it be stated that you did not take a vote, but you are not entitled to take a
But
vote.
you have to put the discussion up there.
No. In fact, a bill got put in the General Assembly this year to require minutes of closed meetings, and it was defeated. Thank goodness, because it does defeat the purpose. So,
I don't remember having to certify that we didn't discuss, did we do that?
No, always.
No, not that.
And usually your closed meeting, I run through Leclerc anyway.
We haven't had that.
And we
And-
very rare that we ever have that anyway.
It's available to you, and again, I think especially with the economic interest, there are some prospects you may need to discuss. Matt would wish we did have one every month. I wish we had somebody we're prospective coming in month after month, but in any event, those are certainly. And so those are, again, it's not everything that's in FOIA about meetings, but it's enough to make sure you're aware of the issues and sort of understand the guidelines and would be able to go, oh, wait a minute, do we need a closed session for that? We're in closed session, we're supposed to sit to talking about what we're supposed to. The other part of the Freedom of Information Act is about documents. And so one of the reasons why Lisa sends you everything to your Goochland addresses is because by using your Goochland VA emails, she is then also preserving a record, just by virtue of that being on the county server, of something that you received or of business documents related to business. Principally, Lisa or Matthew should have almost all the documents you ever have to take related to the transaction of the business here, okay? Because most of it should occur in an open meeting and so forth. And anything related to that could be discoverable under the Freedom of Information Act. It should be available to citizens upon request. We have recently begun to delve into the concept of the record retention that's required, how long records need to be kept, who keeps them, and so forth. And I will say as to that, again, your agendas, your minutes, and so forth, Lisa's keeping for you. To the extent you're doing business on for the EDA by email, please use your county server, because that then puts that record not only saved, but also saved and accessible to county staff to search if we need to for FOIA. So if you do get a communication that for some reason comes to you to a private email or a different email account than your emails, saying it has all these phone numbers, then the best thing to do is to forward it to your Goochland account, respond to it from there, and therefore you've created a record. Again, assuming it's a transaction of business, something coming from the EDA. And that's the easiest way to take care of both the fact that your records are searchable under the Freedom of Information Act and that they get retained under the record retention. So, I'm going to go ahead and come off of the Freedom of Information Act then.
Can I have a question?
Yes,
What's COIA?
that is the Conflicts of Interest Act.
And is that what you're going to next?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yep, that's what I'm going to next. Conflict of Interest Act is actually much more complicated than FOIA is. But again, and there's a lot of very fact-specific analysis and details that would occur in order to determine if someone serving on any public body might have a conflict of interest. to make sure that the public then has confidence that their local government officials, public bodies and so forth, are not doing that. And so what does it require? Again, it generally requires that you not engage in some forms of self-dealing or fraud, bribery type of thing. There is one whole section of FOIA that literally says, don't take a thing of value for your vote. I don't think that you all need to be told item by item, don't do things like that, all right? Generally, you have an understanding that you act in the best interest of the EDA, this is county citizens, and not to have an interest in us. The other ones, the other areas of FOIA, are about when you have a personal interest in, I'm going to start generally, something that comes before the board. Let me start by talking about a personal interest. When I refer to a personal interest under FOIA, it almost always means you and an immediate family member who lives in your house. Okay? So it doesn't necessarily include your grandmother, if she lives next door. It doesn't necessarily include your 25-year-old child who lives in an apartment in Richmond. It generally includes you and your spouse. It could also include children who live in your house. Again, I start to not get quite as detailed because then the facts come out in a number of different ways. So when we're talking about a conflict of interest, we say, do you have a personal interest? Think in your brain, that means me, that means my spouse who lives with me, or the 22-year-old kid still in my house. That's what it might be. So then what do you have to be concerned about? There is the personal interest in, and what is a personal interest? It is always financial. Under FOIA, a personal interest is always financial interest. So not necessarily, for instance, that's my next door neighbor. And I'm concerned about hearing this case, this application for a loan, because it's my next door neighbor. You don't have a conflict under the Virginia Conflicts Act because you know the person or because he's your next door neighbor. All right, that's not a personal interest. Though maybe a personal friendship, that's not a personal interest. It is because you have a financial benefit or liability that's going to arise because of now, personal interests, if you own the property next door, right? And now that perhaps business is coming before you for a loan, you might have a financial interest in whether or not the business gets that loan because they pay you rent. And so now you go, oh, I need to talk to somebody about that situation. Let me stop for a minute and say, when do you need to talk to somebody about that situation? The Conflicts Act imposes from whenever the transaction might first come before you. So you don't wait till the day that the board's about to decide it to go, oh, I might have a conflict. Should I not do something? Because when you have a conflict, you should not be engaged in negotiating, discussion, in a meeting or even with your fellow board members. So the first time you're aware that that might be a problem, if the guy who rents your business to says, I'm gonna go see if I can get an EDA loan. I'm pursuing a whatever. That's when you go, you know what? I'm gonna talk to somebody about whether or not that's a conflict and not wait till it comes up before you. By the way, you do understand that my role tonight is the gloom and the doom of all the stuff, right? Rarely happens. I mean, it does happen, but it rarely happens. I've had EDAs meet for decades and not have conflicts come up. But you are obligated to have received a copy of FOIA and CORPA when you work on it, and also be transparent. And I think it's not a bad idea. We all want to do the right thing and to be transparent. So the training is at that level. Generally these things don't. The next interest that you have to be analyzed under FOIA is a personal interest in a contract. Okay, and again, personal interest means a financial interest.
Sir, can I ask you a question? You talk about reporting, don't wait, report it to whom?
Well, what you're looking for is a conflict's opinion. In other words, you go, wow, there's a fact here that lady said something about, I should look into it. You want to get a conflict's opinion. You can do that a number of ways. You can ask, provide all the details and ask me for a conflict's opinion. to know the rules and come up with a determination. You may ask for one from the Commonwealth's attorney, who by law issues an opinion, and that opinion has a certain defense available to you in court, and you later go, I followed this guy's opinion. Okay, that is a defense in court. Mine doesn't do that for you, not by law. No, in many jurisdictions, might get caught in when I've had this come up. In many jurisdictions, the county attorney prepares one and then sends it to, if the person wants, sends it to the Commonwealth's attorney where they go, yeah, or no, whatever. But in any event, the third thing you can do is also, well, you guys have four. The next thing you can also do is ask for an opinion from the FOIA council. And finally, you guys have LeClaire as your attorneys, and you can ask for a complex opinion from them. Again, it wouldn't be the court one just like mine, but it would to guide your action. Well, that's all from the end, so we have that taken care of. But yeah, please do feel free to interrupt with questions. What's more important is that you understand, and I find that when you can ask the question when it's occurred to you, then you can free your mind up either to, okay, now I understand that, or to listen to what I'm talking about next. So that's certainly a personal interest in a contract. The one thing I did not do for you guys tonight, which I usually do, is I always try to come up with examples for your board. And I knew this stuff well enough. I was like, yeah, these are still planning commission examples of the last people I trained. But in any event, so for instance, in a contract, if the EDA had a desire to purchase real estate that you own, because we're buying it because the mega site is coming. I should use mega site. Amazon. You would not be able, that would be a conflict because you have a financial interest in that contract going through with the EDA because you make money on selling the property. So the last one is a personal interest in a transaction, and it's the goofiest one. It's most amorphous. How about that? It's any interest in any matter considered by the agency. Now, it could be that you or a member of your immediate family is in fact the owner of that real estate that is going to be purchased, or it's owner of a real estate where there's going to be a loan. Okay, so there's not a contract between the EDA and the owner, but it's a transaction that comes before the EDA, and there's a financial interest in you personally. Understanding that FOIA is written for all public bodies, you can imagine this comes up a lot of different ways, like a planning commission or a rezoning, right? It's not a contract, but it's a rezoning. For you guys, things tend to be a little bit more business driven. It is a loan, it is a grant, it is a purchase or sale of something. So it's not going to come up as often. But what you're looking for there is that you may or member of your immediate family may reasonably foresee a direct or an indirect benefit. And so here we're a little bit outside of though it's just money, okay? But it is a reasonably foreseeable direct or indirect benefit or detriment. You'll be harmed if this actually goes before us a certain way by an action of this body. That's a lot around without a very good example for an EDA member, but it comes back to that same idea we're talking about. Shouldn't be self-dealing, shouldn't be things which we're going to have an interest in or get a benefit from. That's what that is designed to do. And all I need to be able to do for you tonight is to say, anything close to this comes up, stop and ask somebody for more money. You want to make sure that we don't violate the Conflicts Act, one, because we don't want to do things the right way, but also because a knowing violation of the Conflicts Act is in fact a class 1 misdemeanor. And so it's punishable as a criminal offense with jail time and fine and so forth. Also can be subject for removal. It can be subject for rescinding a transaction if a member on the body had a conflict and acted. Failing to just disqualify yourself is just a class 3, but still a misdemeanor and fine and so forth. Failure to file your annual statement of economic interests is also a finable offense.
Is there a statute of limitations in all of this, or is it, can it get back?
Let me put it this way, they're not generally statute of limitations on crimes. I think misdemeanors may have, generally have a statute of limitations. But I haven't looked at something specific to COIL. You all have filed, as you have been required to, your statements of economic interest. And
Hey, Stephanie.
I am late.
That's okay, have a seat. You're good.
So you've already done your disclosure filings, and I am not necessarily going to cover that. You're required to keep it up to date, and if you had a specific instance, again, if you're talking about, the receipt of things like gifts, tickets to something like that, please bring up specific instances if you want, if you have those situations. Those don't typically come up with very much use of the job.
One last range of questions, is there a grace period if you have to amend your document throughout the year, if something changes, your financial disclosure form, is it like, I guess would it become effective, you all of a sudden had ownership in a company or a piece of real estate, let's say, and would it become applicable the day that that transaction is finalized, or would it be if you entered into contract on a piece of property?
Are you talking about whether you have to amend your disclosure or when the conflict arises?
When the conflict, like if something, let's say was, I mean, obviously you would use your discretion if you're thinking this is going to align, then accuse yourself or however you do it or seek counsel. But I'm just thinking if you had, for example, were involved in a real estate transaction that had, 180-day close or some sort of long due diligence period where you wouldn't effectively have ownership, so therefore it would not be on a disclosure form. And then at some point in that course of time, you acted in a way that could be construed as conflict. Is that something that could then?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the end of your sentence was, but you have an interest from the time.
Right.
You have an interest from the time you enter into that contract. You may never close on that property.
Right.
But if you reasonably foresee that something going forward will have a direct or indirect benefit or detriment, you're obligated to say, wait a minute.
I think it needs to pass the smell test. It's kind of like you think you're doing something wrong. Obviously, I'm just thinking, I feel like the COIA stuff to me is there's a little more of a gray area where we're just making sure nobody gets kind of caught in the weeds on some of the. It's not quite as cut and dry. I don't think it's FOIA, but
No, it's not. No, it's not. Which is why in some ways this is a higher level discussion, because if I took you into the weeds with me, I mean, I can spend a solid week on a conflicts letter if I am seriously having to tail down all the facts in every little way it could go. I mean, it's an undertaking.
Right.
Because, so the other things that I have not told you about, because again, we need this level that you're aware of, and that is if you have a conflict, what happens? Let me just tell you that the short answer is usually you don't participate in the decision, okay? There are certain things that you could still participate in the decision for. What types of things? Something that's county-wide, okay? You all are Grisham County taxpayers, right? If you do something here that's going to affect, when you're in a large group of people or a group of 3 or more that have a similar interest, that actually is handled under the Conflicts Act as not being an individual in conflict. What I'm going to get you to today is understand what situations could arise for a conflict and throw up a flag because somebody needs to tell me what I need to do. I'm going to stop talking about this to anybody. I'm going to seek an opinion, and I'll go from there.
I'm going to throw one scenario that's really going to pose a rabbit hole. So what if you're making a decision, let's say the EDA is loaning a prospective business money that's in the theory is going to lower your taxes, how is that not a financial benefit to the people making a decision as a county resident?
Right, because though it declares that you have a conflict, there's a section of the Conflicts Act that says when 3 or more people, when you're in a group of 3 or more people similarly situated, your interest is the same, you are
I just started thinking of random stuff, so sorry.
That's okay. I have no doubt that that's good for you to do. So that's what I wanted you to be aware of from the Freedom of Information Act and the Complex Act. That you're certainly aware they exist. You're aware if an issue comes up, that you're going to seek some assistance. You're aware of communications and documents, email documents.
So that means we have to keep our committee to 2.
You do.
So good thing we never had that committee meeting.
Unless you choose to. The board has chosen to have its audit committee with 3 board members. But that means that every time it meets, they have to actually, it is a meeting of the board and it has to be notified to the last board. Though I think there's actual notice required of subcommittee meetings too. I should look into that and have that.
I think if it's a formal subcommittee, I think if you two were to just meet to discuss, for example, a loan, it would not be required.
And I think if you form a subcommittee of this group, then you do it in ethics.
Like the board formed the Red Sea, and when the Red Sea met, we would notice that. Remember the Red Sea Rural Economic Development
Okay.
Workshop on that?
Yeah.
The Board of Supervisors formed that, and then when that committee met, it was a formal committee of the board. There was a notice of that.
The Reds.
That's what we
I
used
was
to call
thinking
it the
Moses,
Red Sea.
I didn't,
It was I on the Red Sea.
That's what we called it here, we'd say the Red Sea is me, R-E-D, you know.
So if you don't mind, then the next thing I would move to is about your bylaws.
Yes.
2 things. One is, there was a change in state law this year with respect to your electronic participation. But the change, while they rewrote a lot of it, it did not substantively change. The one substantive change I found has to do with the member who might participate away from by electronic communication. And what it made specific in the in FOIA was that the place where the person was participating from did not have to be open to the public. Your bylaws already say that. Your bylaws today are already fully in compliance with the new July 1st law on electronic meeting. So you have no need to change it. That being said, the bylaws were prepared for you to change to reflect the difference in your membership from 7 to 5 and your quorum from 4 to 3. And that becomes effective as of July 1, and the board is changing the county ordinance on July 3. So I would recommend that you revise your bylaws as you apply either one of those effective dates to reflect new membership.
So we need a motion to,
We're not voting.
You don't have a quorum.
oh, that's right.
I didn't know when she didn't consider the
Right.
table, sorry, I had to add in all the names, but she's doing your next presentation.
Okay.
So, yeah, you cannot act without a quorum, so of course, you can change those whenever. But, those were the topics I wanted to cover for you tonight. It was nice to meet you.
Thank you very much.
We appreciate you coming.
Sure, happy to do it.
Any refreshing, but it's always good.
It is.
I don't know much about the FOIA, so.
And like I said, sometimes that's my role, to talk about things that rarely happen, but just in case.
Those are the ones that bite you.
Right. So,
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tara.
Yes, we are.
Mhm.
Speaking of things that you don't think about except when you need it.
You're right.
Is this the hot seat?
Maybe, you could say, I think that's just the company thing. Yeah. I'm gonna go ahead and say that. Thank you.
See ya.
Thank you so much for allowing me to be here. I'm Stephanie Heitzman with Bancorp, and we provide your coverage, so your liability coverages. And I see that you do have copies of the proposal, and I mean, just to sort of help you navigate that real quickly, I'm not going to read it to you, but the page that says 1 of 8, which is called the contribution summary form, that's just an easy way to sort of look at the different coverages. You have a $2 million limit for general liability, and for us, general liability basically means if someone says that you've harmed their property or their body, someone says you hurt me in some way, property or bodily injury, that's where we, advertising is also under that, advertising injury. There is no deductible there, and there's no aggregates, meaning you've got that, well, let's talk about what you have. You've got a 2 million underlying limit, and then you've got an excess limit of 3 million, which just follows that line of coverage. So really, you've got a $5 million limit there. No aggregate, no deductible. So someone sues you because they say you hurt their property or body, then that's where you've got that limit. And that is actually outside of the defense limits. The defense is in addition to that coverage limit, okay? So what we do is we just take that underlying limit of general liability and add it to the excess liability. The public official's liability limit is only 2 million. The excess doesn't go over the public officials. And that coverage is for, we call it wrongful acts, but basically decisions of this body or staff or volunteers even of this body working on behalf of this body. So, so that coverage for you. Each of these has a page that sort of provides a bit more detail for it. But in a nutshell, that's what you have coverage for. In addition, you've got crime coverage. So that's basically it's your bond coverage, faithful performance of duties for your chairman and for staff, treasurer, or all board members are covered by this, but faithful performance of duties while you're, working as an EDA member. Basically, some people call public officials liability E&O coverage, errors and omissions coverage, and then some people call the crime coverage employee dishonesty coverage. It's usually an employee that takes from you, as opposed to property coverage where it's someone else takes from you. And you actually must not own any property because we don't have property coverage here. So that's available, but you don't need it.
You just have the BNP line at
We
midpoint.
did talk
Yeah,
about that.
yeah, and that would be covered for liability. So, but there's no, thanks for pointing that out to me. There's no cost for covering your property because if it gets struck by lightning, what's gonna burn? You know what I mean? But if somebody is on that property and harms themselves in some way, sprains their ankle and says, hey, I was on your property and I sprained my ankle, that we would cover that for liability, meaning medical payments coverage. So if you get, go to the doctor and have.
That's the one's got the overlap of the extra 3, so 5 total.
Yeah, except for medical payments, it's only a $5,000 limit. If they sue you, like I'm gonna give them a $5,000 limit just to have them go get their ankle fixed and they're fine, except when they sue you, and then that's when we jump back into it. Oh no, my ankle's deformed and I need to sue you for another couple of million.
I would say instead of come up with just random questions, keep in mind that one line you do have has a pond on it, so if somebody were to fall in that pond and drown, sue you for wrongful death or something.
So that's really important. Thank you for pointing that out. We would like to help you put up, or I guess evaluate that for some risk control measures. I don't know what kind of signage you have there, but we can.
We have nothing there.
Why don't we get one of my risk control consultants to just come down here and take a look and see, if it's appropriate. I'm not really sure where that is, but
It's in Midpoint Industrial Park. The pond technically is not on the county-owned property, but the access to the pond, the parcel adjoins the pond, and it's a very steep slope. And the last 2 times I've been out there, there's people walking just around
So
the
the
park.
pond
really?
belongs to who?
The pond is still in Gordon's name, I think, or possibly under the Midpoint Owners Association, which this group is part of.
Okay.
Might just be worth looking into.
Okay, so the pond really isn't on your property, but access to the pond is, and you could get named in a lawsuit anyway, so why don't we just take a look and see if you might put signs on your part of the property? All right, that's a great idea. Evaluation. Thanks for
I can
pointing that out.
provide you the address for the property.
That'd be great.
I'll give Matt your email and he can send it to you.
Okay, perfect, thank you. I don't have my business cards. And then the other two coverages that you have are environmental liability, which is just part of the general liability. There's no real cost for that. There is a big deductible, so that's one of those things that if it's a covered claim, there's a $25,000 deductible. It's what we've had in the past, it was a leak in an above ground tank, but it was snow on the ground, and so there was no heat in the building, so they thought that they needed to add, there was no oil in the tank, so they thought they needed to add more oil, which they did, but it turns out there was below the snow, but above the ground, there was a leak, and it was in the pipe or whatever, and it was going down to the creek, the cows were drinking it. I mean, one of those sort of catastrophic things, and that's why this is in place literally, because that did happen years ago, and so we just put it in place, and it's been in place ever since. And then the cyber risk, $500,000 limit. So that's sort of a hot topic these days. I don't know how much information that y'all are sharing online or whatever that could come into play or become breached. The only thing I will say about this $500,000 limit is you're involved with that limit with the entire pooled limit of $5 million. So any 1 year from that pool, we're only going to spend $5 million. So if many others have claims of $500,000, because those that have that limit are not buying an increased limit. We did present a proposal for an increased limit. That was like an additional $1,000 to get to the $1 million limit, which would be your own limit, not involved in the pool limit. I don't really think you have much exposure here, so I just want to point that out.
So would that be, for example, if you're saying a breach, if somebody, so I'm the director of economic development, say somebody sends me a business plan that has personal information in it, bank account numbers, social security numbers, if that were to be breached, and then they sue us, that's what would cover that, or would that be county?
If that information's stolen and they can prove that you're liable for it having been stolen,
But
then
would the
that's what that
liability
coverage is
be with
for.
the EDA or with the county at that point?
He
It depends.
serves,
So
he's the economic
So I'm
development
a
director
county
of the county.
employee,
He
so I
is
would
a
assume
county.
that would be a county issue, but.
Yeah, more than likely it would be a county issue. You would probably report it as both, and we just figure that out. But it's it's whatever hat you were wearing, I guess, at that point.
Would it have anything to do with a business that would submit information to you on any kind of form, like an application
That's
for a
what I'm
business?
saying, anything that we would have.
That's what I'm
that
asking.
it's-
Like, we have people who apply to the EDA for loans that would have their personal banking or,
Yeah, I think it'd be more of a widespread, like if you had social security, well, social security numbers, but credit card numbers for many people, like all the
Class
citizens.
action.
Yeah,
suit,
all
more
the
than a-
citizens, and somehow somebody wanted that information and took it or breached, scared you enough so that you thought there even was a breach. And then you would reach out to us and we would, handle it from there. I don't think you have that volume of data for individuals, personally identifiable data.
Right.
So I think and the county has coverage, of course, too. So I think you're fine. I just wanted to tell you that it doesn't make that big a difference for this type of data, but a volume of data.
do you feel that the EDA has the adequate coverage as an entity?
Well, two things I'll point out. I think you guys are well covered. A $5 million limit is a great limit. It's a high limit, and I didn't know if you had a fear of some kind of exposure. land use is included, so you guys make decisions on that, that is included under the liability, but, and then the other thing is the crime limit is a little higher than I see normally for EDAs, and I'm wondering if you have some kind of a grant or some reason that you needed a $750,000 limit rather than our normal limit, our minimum limit is $250,000.
Can you explain what the crime is again?
Yeah, it's basically when someone within the entity takes
That's
from you.
probably a county measure because of past
Yeah.
instances here.
And I believe that was at Ben Sloan's when he was.
So that was probably adjusted, it's just never been
Right.
allocated or looked at.
Because of the previous incident.
If you want to consider a lower limit, I can just present you what it would cost, and you can just wait it. It's not that much of a difference in cost, but it's.
Well, this is $250 deductible.
Yeah, and as would the other.
And what would the other be?
The other one would cost about $700. So it's not a huge difference,
You can send it to me, and then when the authority
So
evaluates everything and votes on the amount, then they can discuss it.
I mean, you're sitting, EDA's sitting on about that equivalent of cash in the bank, so it might not be a bad idea to keep it at the high level.
Right, and I'm gonna let them vote on it.
And the other thing I was gonna say is to get the $3 million extra, it's only $338. You know what I mean? So it's neither here. Whatever you want to do, obviously, it's certainly up to you. But I'll send you just so you have it right.
Okay. And so when you send that information, so with the pond situation that Matt had mentioned, that would, when we do get ready to vote on the billing, that would be incorporated, or I guess you provide feedback on what your consultant finds out.
Yeah, and it's no charge for that.
Okay.
Yeah, no charge at all. That's just part of your member
Right.
services. So
Okay.
we'll send a guy out to take a look, and someone might take them if they, if they can't find them. I'm sure it's pretty easy to get to, but anyway. so-
It is.
Yeah, okay, so they'll just go there and take a look, maybe take some pictures, and then they'll
Okay.
provide you with a report
Okay,
and suggestions if they have any.
okay,
So,
okay.
I'm sure I understand the general liability, $2 million. Is there, I'm not aware, is there separability or something like that? Are we covered individually as well as the board?
great question.
What are the limits of the individual?
So if you're, first of all, lawsuit comes in and names you, and as a board member, you're definitely covered. If they name you as a board member and as an individual, you're definitely covered, because we're gonna defend you as a board member and you're gonna enjoy the defense as an individual. If they just name you as an individual, that's a little tricky, right? Because it makes it sound like you weren't doing EDA business. So, you would still file it with us and let us take a look at it. But if they just name you as an individual and not the EDA, only you, you know what I mean? If they name the EDA no matter, and if they name the entire EDA and only you individually, not these others individually, you would still enjoy the defense, right? Because I'm defending the EDA, so you'll benefit from that.
What's the coverage percent? 2 million
Same,
individual, and then 2 million for the EDA? Or?
It's the entire occurrence is basically 5 million, right? So it's the 2 plus the 3. So it's 5 for the entire occurrence, but it doesn't count the legal defense, right? So the legal defense is going on excess of the 5 million. That's for, if you were to lose effectively. That would be the max. So, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, great question. And that's the same, whether it's public officials. Now, the public officials doesn't have the 3 million writing on it. That's just separate. I could give you a quote for 5 million in public officials, but that's, if you're,
Right, now with the public officials liability, usually with the funds of the EDA, one doesn't solely do anything, it's 2 or more. So it's like a safety mechanism. where, you know, there would be no extortion or harassment or something. It's, the money is within the finance department of the county. We kind of oversee the accounts, and it's their accounts, and we work with them. Two checks are always signed by two different
Right.
people, so there's safety
Yeah. And that's
mechanisms built in.
That's under the crime coverage, those are
Okay.
all good protections for
Okay.
the employee dishonesty and the faithful performance of duties, bond that you had. But for the public officials, that's really for decisions made by the board. And a lot of times it's things like wrongful termination, which y'all don't employ people, that. So it's, you know, but it's decisions which could be, you don't even really get involved in land use. I mean, I know I've been here before, and I've told you that I worked for Charlotte County for 20 years. So, did you know that? So, I was here for many years, kind of in the same region, and my kids played baseball against your kids. But anyways, so as far as, you know, what does the public official, what decisions of a public official nature you're making, it's just whatever decisions you're making, you know, you've got that coverage for $2 million when you're acting on behalf of the EDA, making decisions on behalf of the EDA. Does that all make sense?
Anybody else have any questions?
So I'll send you, I'll get risk control, one of my consultants to reach out to you, or Matt.
Okay.
Matt.
I'll send just the address, and I'll send a property file that has the and tax number, the location, and all that stuff, so.
Thank you for coming all this way. Really appreciate it. May I see you?
Thank you, Stephanie.
Everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. Yeah.
And if they come up with any questions, we'll email you, you know, if something comes up, any last minute.
I grew up in Gooder Park with this guy. Yeah, I'll get the risk control guy to come in and then
Okay.
send you the pricing.
Thank you very much.
Y'all take good care.
Thanks.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you. Did you drive back to the tunnel?
I was standing still. I was like, thank you so much.
Do you have to go back, or are you staying in Richmond?
I actually live in Charlottesville.
Oh, okay.
So,
you're on
and
the
our
road.
office is in Roanoke. Yeah, our
all over
office
the
is
place.
in Roanoke. So I'm all over the place, yeah. Wow, so, but that's what makes it fun, right?
Right there.
All right, yeah, thanks.
Thank you again.
Thanks, I'll take good care. And nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Okay, so next on the agenda is to appoint the vacated treasurer position, and we can't do that tonight. So we'll have to wait till our next regular scheduled meeting for that.
Mhm.
We can give a loan update, really only loan on that, so.
Correct.
Kurt and I have talked, and I've talked to Lucy, although we didn't all three meet together. And I also had a really long talk with John Badesky, very long talk with him. Good talk about just the overall kind of strategy that's moving forward, working in tandem with the county. So I haven't really had a chance to talk to you about this, but I'm of the opinion, and I feel like you're kind of right there with me, and haven't really talked to Lucy again about it, but I'm of the opinion that the loan application that is before us now, that we should not approve it. Although I really want to help Britta and Carlos, I'm super nervous about having them not owning the property. And Lucy has looked at potentially purchasing the 1 acre lot behind the building. But after talking to John Badesky about that, he said it really would not really make all that much sense for us, because it would really only be benefiting that one business, because there's really plenty of parking for the rest of the community. and there's a lot of other county-owned property that could be developed into parking that would benefit the rest of the community, so it wouldn't really be a prudent decision for us to do that, in his opinion, which I have to agree with after talking to him.
I agree.
So, although I really personally do want to help Carlos and Brenda, because I'd like to see a restaurant in that particular building. We need something in that building, and they seem like if they'd be a pretty good fit for the project that they put before us. But I feel like the best way we could help them right now would be perhaps to encourage them to go ahead and apply for a variance and maybe offer to pay for their application to show good faith that we are standing behind them.
To get them exempt from paying.
Yes, and John has talked to each of the board members individually about it, and although there's no certainty, there's probably a pretty good chance that they may waive support a variance so
But
that
they
they
won't-
don't have to get the gravel paved.
But Carlos and Britta originally were told by John's staff that they would have to pay it.
Indeed,
Okay, so
but
that's why they came to
I
us.
believe that after further looking at that as individual members, not as a full board together, I think that they're more likely to potentially approve a variance for an older building to keep in character, even though the overly restrictive ordinance doesn't support that. That any new building maybe that came forward through the planning commission would be required to be paid, but some of these older buildings where this keeps coming up, it's the same problem keeps coming up, they might support a variance.
There's a process in place where they can apply for a variance, where they would go to the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Right.
Board of Zoning Appeals would hear the case, then defer to the board, either with a approval or denial, and then the board can make a decision, however they see fit, not reliant upon the BZA. But it's about a 60 to 90 day process, and any applicant could go through that process. So while staff may have indicated that paving was probably a likely requirement, anybody has the opportunity to request a waiver.
I think that's a great workaround. I mean, I think it solves their issue, right?
Well, it's still going to take a while.
I get that. I mean, so we gotta tell them to,
So I think we need to just work with the county to see if there's anything else that we can do in the meantime, because they're anxious to
so
get
should,
started.
do we send a letter to them to tell them to go come in and?
I think that we do need to formally give them an answer to their application.
And at this point, they still have not signed the lease, correct?
I'm unsure.
I would make the suggestion in that letter that it might make sense to have them actually control the property, or at least have an option before they go through a 90-day process of the BZA and the Board of Supervisors with property that they hypothetically may get at some point down the road.
Yes.
Because I think that would put decision makers in a situation having to approve something that may or may not be the end result, and then that sets
Good point.
precedent for the next person coming in. So I think a lease in place would certainly help their cause. But obviously there comes with that a risk to them that if they don't get the approval, then they have a building that requires paving, but some skin in the game is probably a good thing.
So one thing that we would need to vote on that we can't do tonight would be to offer to pay the fee for them to apply for the variance.
Any idea how much that is?
Isn't it?
Minimal, but I don't know what it is off the top of my head. I mean, if I can find out, put it up.
It's on the website, isn't it under the ordinance?
Wait a minute,
Isn't
I'm
that an
sorry.
Yeah, I think it's
ordinance?
a few $100.
Okay, I think that's fair, that we can at least offer them that.
Is there an amount that we have to vote on to pay without voting?
No, you're not voting tonight.
No, but when you do vote, I would just basically make a motion.
And we can get the
vote.
I mean, do we
information.
have
can
to
have
vote
this-
on any amount? Is there a certain amount cap where we don't have
Anything
to
would have to be voted on.
So so I'm clear, do you want one of us to look into what the variance would be and let you know what that fee would be?
Yes, that'd be great.
And then, are you talking with them about the
Well-
EDA? Cause just so I understand, if you're doing this by letter
I
or
think we need to write a letter to them.
Right,
who's doing the letter? So when you write the letter, are you going to say, that the EDA is going to consider covering the cost of the variance, and is that what you're saying in the letter?
Well, also that we would feel more comfortable, if they had a signed lease in place before we would commit to doing that.
right, and then to apply for variance and let the county decide on that, we would.
Do you
offer-
want Matt to draft the letter? Who's drafting the letter?
I don't wanna put it on that.
Will you draft a letter?
I'll do it.
Matt, because he can work with CD to get,
Okay,
what the variance
it's
is.
as simple as could be.
I'll draft a letter and circulate the EDA, and then you all can decide who it comes from.
Thank you.
Come from the chairman, but I'll draft a letter.
Okay. But,
And it can be like a consensus that you're supportive of it.
Right,
Yes.
It's not
exactly,
like a vote,
right,
right,
it's just
exactly.
your,
But it gives them an option to move forward and or get the lease going, they're gonna commit, and get the, variance, and then depending on that.
well, John said that time is of the essence, since those variances.
Yes.
It's just a process, there's no way really around it. They can push it through to some extent, but it's gonna take at least 60 to 90 days, so they need to get on it yesterday. Any questions or the other comments about the loan application, we've been going through this whole loan application discussion now for months and months and months, and one thing that John pointed out is that we do ask the county to kind of serve the EDA as our staff, so we have to take that into account when we're considering a loan application, because who would administer it, and what if something went wrong, and also Matt gets a lot of phone calls and has to answer questions, and we haven't been able to really provide him with concrete substance on what our application process really is at this point. So we need to either decide or back off, because he needs to have answers, and so does John's, the rest of the staff also has to. They're going to act on our behalf. So what I would suggest that we do is discuss this during the strategic planning process and make sure that our objectives for having a loan application process, or loan process is program aligns with what we
Can we
as
actually do it?
to, the authority and the county board, if it lines up with where we both want to go.
Mhm.
I really think we need to make sure we're more clear on it than we are now. So just kind of back off a little bit until we have that clear
It's just next Friday.
and reevaluate it.
it's just an 8:30 to 5, an all day
So,
strategic
plenty of time to
discussion,
talk
no
about it.
voting, it's
So all
just
the time you need to
discussing,
discuss.
Exactly, so we'll,
and you'll have a better idea.
good,
We'll have a much better idea.
I think we'll come to that. And we'll have other people here too. Okay?
Okay. Any other discussion about that? Okay. We do need to have approval of the minutes from,
No
That will
quorum.
be no
can't do
quorum,
that, right?
so you,
Basically, that's it.
that's it until your next meeting, and well, you'll adjourn to June 27th at 8:30, and then July 18th at 5:30.
One question I have as far as next week is, any special requests for food or drinks? I'm just gonna have like Panera or something, breakfast, just
I'm bringing in lunch.
pastries.
Yeah,
Bagel.
so it was,
I'll try to find some gluten-free coffee, tea,
I know you
water.
can't get anything from Panera, so I'll just take care of my own breakfast and do something for lunch.
Okay, so we'll have breakfast and lunch, probably not.
Licking whole creek beer.
Or- I'll plan to have everybody at Hardywood by
About by 5 p.m.
2 o'clock, we'll hopefully get Hardywood, so.
So we can edit earlier if we feel we need to.
it ends early. I think the idea was to have the time set aside to make sure we have time, adequate time.
Good.
We have an agenda that we going out, with the consultants. I think I wouldn't venture a guess of how long it's gonna take.
Yeah.
I would
It'll
assume
fly by, I don't think we're gonna end early, there's a lot to discuss.
there is. So,
It's at the emergency center off of 288.
it is. Conference room, as
Interesting.
you walk in, the
Yeah,
right
West
door.
so it's close to us.
Oh, okay.
Just
The-
in
the-
case
Yeah.
anyone
Figured if
has
anybody got really heated, we're right there.
The HVAC facility
I was gonna do this.
Oh,
It's very
just-
nice.
Yeah.
off of
Very
Tuttle
nice.
Creek and, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
We
great.
thought- I didn't even know they had a
Where
conference
where
room
the bridge
available.
should be.
Yes,
What's
exactly.
that?
Where the bridge should be.
Where the bridge
Yes,
will never
where the
be.
bridge should be.
So walk in the front door and immediately to your right, there's the
Got it.
conference room.
Got it.
So do we even have a treasurer's report?
The treasurer's report is in the packet. The treasurer reports out what's in the
Right,
reports.
Okay.
so it's nothing to worry.
Correct. And then I'll just move these subjects over to July.
Okay,
Thank you, Lisa.
You're welcome.
and so we can't even vote on having the
No,
check.
Nope.
Okay.
nothing. So
Um,
we'll just adjourn to the 2 dates. And that's it.
do we have any other new business you wanted to bring forward?
Not today.
Okay, so we'll adjourn to the special meeting on June 22nd and then
7.
27th
27th.
at 8:30.